Inside Sussex's most notorious woman with shocking details, real crime stories and sentences. The rain fell softly on the Sydney streets that night, turning every light into a blurred streak of blue and silver. Inside a busy McDonald's near George Street, the cameras caught a moment that no one thought would become evidence. A young woman, calm, smiling, her dark hair neatly tied back, stood in line, waiting for her coffee. Her name was Dr. Preeti Reddy, a respected dentist with a warm laugh and a future everyone admired. Behind her in line, a man stepped forward. He smiled too, polite, familiar. His name was Dr. Harsh Nardi, her ex-boyfriend. The two had met again for the first time in months that weekend at a dental conference. Friends said they had spoken for a while, nothing unusual, just two professionals catching up. But what happened after that meeting would leave the city frozen in disbelief. The camera showed them walking out together. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. By the next morning, Preeti's phone stopped ringing. Her family grew worried. She never missed calls, not from her sister, not from her parents. Hours passed. Messages went unanswered. And as daylight faded, dread began to replace hope. Her sister Nithya called the police. The officers began their usual routine: trace the phone, check the last transactions, pull camera footage. Everything seemed ordinary at first, until they found her car missing, and her hotel room untouched. When they checked the city's traffic cameras, one frame stood out. A silver car, matching hers, driving out of the city after midnight. Another vehicle, a dark sedan, followed closely behind. The license plate matched one name: Dr. Harsh Nardi. At first, police treated it as a disappearance. Maybe she had gone away for a few days. Maybe she needed time. But the small details told a different story. Her bank cards weren't used. Her phone was off. Her work colleagues said she had a full list of appointments Monday morning, and she never showed. By that evening, detectives visited Harsh's apartment. He wasn't there. His neighbors said they had seen him leave early that morning, looking pale, carrying only a small bag. He checked into a hotel across town under his real name, but by the time officers arrived, the door was locked from the inside. They forced it open. What they found stopped them cold. Harsh lay motionless on the bed, a note beside him. The air was still, the curtains drawn. There was no sign of struggle, just the smell of hotel room detergent and the quiet hum of an air conditioner. The note was short. It mentioned regret, love, and goodbye. But it didn't answer the question everyone was asking. Where is Dr. Preeti Reddy? That night, investigators searched his car. Inside, they found traces of something dark. Fibers that didn't belong. A small earring lodged between the seat cushions. They knew then, they weren't looking for a missing person anymore. The next morning, an officer spotted a silver car parked near a quiet side street, miles away from the city center. The windows were fogged, the locks intact, the air heavy. Inside lay what everyone feared. Sydney stood still. One woman's smile, caught in a moment of CCTV footage, had now become the center of a tragedy that would shake the entire nation. And as detectives looked at that footage again, one question hung in the room like a shadow. What really happened after that smile? Before the headlines, before the rain, before the CCTV footage that captured the last smile, there was once a love story that looked perfect from the outside. Preeti met Harsh Nardi years earlier at a medical event in Sydney. He was confident, funny, and ambitious, everything she thought she wanted. They were both young dentists at the start of their careers, eager to build something meaningful. He admired her intelligence, she admired his drive. Their friends called them a power couple, two rising stars in white coats, working long hours, chasing big dreams. For a while, life felt good. Dinners after long shifts, weekend trips to the coast, phone calls that lasted until dawn. But slowly, the laughter began to fade. It started small. Harsh began asking little questions. Who were you with? Why didn't you answer sooner? Then came the surprise visits to her clinic, the constant messages, the subtle guilt whenever she spent time with friends. Preeti brushed it off. She told herself it was love, that he just cared too much. But love, real love, doesn't come with fear. Her friends noticed first. "He's a bit too intense," one said. "He watches you a lot," said another. Preeti laughed it off. "He's just protective." But inside, she began to feel something she couldn't explain, a quiet unease that followed her everywhere. When she tried to end the relationship, Harsh didn't take it well. He apologized endlessly, promising to change, showing up at her door with flowers. For a while, he seemed sincere. But then, the old patterns returned: jealousy, control, emotional pressure. It wasn't long before she ended it for good. She changed her number, moved apartments, focused on her work. By then, she was one of the most respected young dentists in her field, calm, confident, and independent again. Harsh, however, never truly let go. Months turned into years. Then, one day, out of nowhere, came the email. "Hey, Preeti. I'll be at the dental conference next month. It would be nice to catch up." She hesitated before replying. It had been so long. Maybe time had healed things. Maybe they could be friends. She agreed to meet him at the conference, just to talk. Friends later said she seemed cautious but calm that weekend. They were seen chatting in the hotel lobby, smiling politely, nothing unusual. To anyone watching, it looked like two professionals reconnecting. But behind Harsh's smile was something darker, something carefully hidden behind charm. That night, after the event, he asked if they could have dinner, just to catch up properly. She agreed. They spoke about their work, family, life. Everything seemed normal. But when she stood to leave, he hesitated. "You've changed," he said softly. "You're colder now." She smiled politely. "No, just stronger." That answer stayed with him. Later, police would find a draft message on his phone, unsent. It read, "You don't get to walk away from me again." The next day, she left the conference early. She called her sister, told her she was heading home. Her voice was light, calm, no sign of fear. She mentioned she'd stop for coffee before driving back. That coffee stop was the McDonald's where the camera caught her last smile. And in the background of that footage, almost invisible to everyone but the detectives who watched it frame by frame, was Harsh, stepping into line behind her. The day after Preeti disappeared, Sydney's rain hadn't stopped. The sky hung heavy and gray, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Inside the police station, a dozen detectives gathered around a glowing monitor. On the screen, they replayed the same piece of footage over and over again, Preeti standing in line, smiling, unaware she was being followed. Detective Angela Smith leaned forward. "There, look at his eyes," she said quietly. They zoomed in. Behind her, Harsh Nardi was watching. Not smiling. Just watching. From that moment on, everything changed. Investigators began tracing every step. Preeti's phone stopped pinging around 11:45 p.m. Harsh's car, according to traffic cameras, followed her through the city, turning down the same roads. Then, both signals vanished. Police tech teams dove into their phones and laptops. What they found painted a chilling picture of a man who had been living in two realities, one for the world, and one in secret. Harsh's search history was full of late-night questions. How to track someone's phone without them knowing? How to erase GPS history? How long does it take for a car to be found if it's hidden? To anyone else, they were just words. But to investigators, they were the fingerprints of obsession. Back at Preeti's apartment, her sister Nithya sat surrounded by police, holding her phone and shaking hands. They asked her to scroll through old messages. The last one from Harsh read simply, "I just want to see you one last time. Please." She never replied. Detectives followed the digital trail to Harsh's hotel room. When they arrived, they found him gone, but the front desk clerk remembered him well. He was quiet. Paid in cash. Didn't want room service, she said. But he kept asking if anyone had come looking for him. Hours Hours later, police forced the door open. Inside was silence. The curtains drawn. The air cold. A single note left on the desk. It wasn't a confession. Just a few haunting lines. I loved her more than life itself. I couldn't lose her again. The investigation didn't stop there. Forensic officers uncovered security footage of Harsh's car driving toward the outskirts of Sydney around midnight. Then, nothing, until his phone went dark. But technology always leaves a trace. GPS data showed one final location before the signal ended, a quiet side street near an industrial park. It was there, 2 days later, that officers found Preeti's car. It looked peaceful at first glance, parked neatly, windows fogged from the rain. But inside, the silence told the truth. Detectives stood in the rain, their jackets soaked, faces expressionless. They didn't speak for a long time. One officer placed his hat against his chest. The storm around them seemed to fade into nothing. When the forensic report came back, it confirmed what everyone feared: Preeti's last moments had been quick, sudden, and brutal. There had been no time to call for help. But even in death, her story spoke loudly, through the evidence, through the trail of digital obsession left behind by a man who couldn't accept no. That night, as the city lights shimmered on the wet roads, Detective Smith drove home in silence. She looked at the photo of Preeti pinned to her dashboard, smiling, bright, full of life. Smith whispered to herself, if only someone had seen it coming. The next morning, headlines filled every screen. Dentist found dead, ex-boyfriend's note sparks investigation. The case was now closed on paper. But to those who followed it, the real question still lingered in the air. Was it love, or was it control that killed her? The rain had finally stopped over Sydney. The city was quiet again, but something in its rhythm had changed. Every headline, every whisper in cafes, every news broadcast carried the same story: the young dentist whose life ended at the hands of someone who once said he loved her. But for those who knew Dr. Preeti Reddy, this wasn't just a crime. It was a wound that would never truly heal. The police wrapped up their investigation within weeks. The evidence was undeniable. Harsh Nardi acted alone. His note, his search history, and the forensic reports all pointed to one tragic truth: he planned it, and then he ended his own life. But there was no justice to be served. No courtroom, no sentence, no chance for her family to look him in the eyes and ask why. That absence, the lack of closure, was what haunted them most. At the memorial held a few months later, hundreds of people gathered under umbrellas. The air was soft with candlelight and the faint smell of rain. Her photo stood in the center, that same bright smile that had once lit up every room she entered. Her sister, Nithya, spoke first. Her voice trembled, but she stood tall. Preeti was light. She was laughter. She was strength. And she trusted someone who didn't deserve it. But this isn't the end of her story, it's the beginning of change. That moment marked the start of something bigger. The Reddy family began working with community groups and safety advocates to raise awareness about emotional manipulation and hidden control in relationships. For the first time, many in Australia began to speak openly about coercive control, the quiet, invisible kind of abuse that often comes long before violence. Television programs, documentaries, and even law reform discussions began to reference her case. It wasn't about blame anymore. It was about warning signs, the ones that are easy to ignore until it's too late. Detective Angela Smith, who led the case, spoke at a conference later that year. She said, "Love should never make you feel small. It should never make you afraid to say no. If it does, that's not love, it's control." Her words echoed across the room. In time, the rain stopped being a reminder of tragedy. For her friends, it became something gentler, a memory of calm, of reflection. On anniversaries, they still gather at the park she loved, releasing lanterns into the night sky. Each one glowing softly against the blue darkness, like fragments of her light still watching over them. Her clinic kept her photo at the reception desk, smiling, warm, welcoming, a reminder to every patient who walked in that kindness and strength often go hand in hand. the story of Dr. Preeti Reddy became more than a case file. It became a lesson written in the quiet moments, the moments when people choose to speak up, to walk away, or to help someone who can't. And even though the storm that took her is long gone, the echo of her voice remains. In every safety campaign, in every family teaching their daughters and sons about real love, and in every detective who looks a little closer when something doesn't feel right. Because some stories don't end when the file closes. Some stories become warnings. And some, like hers, become a light, shining through the rain, reminding us all that strength isn't silence.